Hi guys! So I am here, as it is the end of December, to tell you all about the books I read in the second half of December and give you reviews for them. So of late I've been doing 2 reading wrap-ups each month, one in the middle, one at the end, because I've been reading a little bit more and I want the time to give you my fuller thoughts in videos. So if you want to know about the books I read in the first half of December, I will link that wrap-up down below. But I now have a further 4 books to review for you today, so I will jump straight in. So if we do this in the order I read them, the first book I have to talk to you about is Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. This was the Feminist Orchestra book club read for November-December, which is a book club I run with Lauren over at Lauren Wade. I will link the Goodreads group down below, but this is a book that I have heard so much hype about over the years. It is, I believe, one of the first published science fiction novels written by a black woman. So it's like quite canonical in the science fiction genre because of that, but it's also a phenomenal novel. I love this. This easily got 5 stars from me. This book centres around our protagonist who is living in the 1970s, which is also when this book was written, and she's a black woman, she is married to a white man, and somehow she ends up time travelling back to the time at which slavery was at its peak in the United States of America, to one of the southern states, and is supposed to save the life of a young white boy. And once she's done that, she then comes back to her time in the 70s and a few years later travels back in time again to another point where the same young boy, Rufus, but a few years older, is also needing his life saved, and essentially she keeps travelling back in time in order to save Rufus's life, who she quickly realises is one of her ancestors, but she doesn't know what's causing this time travel, and you don't really find that out. This book isn't a book about the science behind the science fiction. That's not the main focus of it. The main focus of it is very much the historical interaction between the 1970s and the 1800s, when she's travelling back in time to, and her experience of slavery, having only heard about it through reading about it, obviously experiencing her own form of racism in her own time, but never obviously having lived through slavery, and being flung back into this period in time in which she is considered a slave and has to act as a slave in order to like sort of get through it every day and not draw too much attention to herself. And it's incredible. It's so well written, it's so intriguing. It's got both a fascinating plot, brilliant characters, and some interesting commentary and look back on the sort of history of slavery and civil rights in the United States of America. My one thing that I did think though when I was reading this, still a 5-star book, but this made me laugh a little bit near the beginning, was how quickly our protagonist is able to just accept what's happening. Oh, I'm travelling back to save my ancestor. Of course, that's what's happening. And I'm curious if any of you have read this book, if you felt similarly, because very quickly into the book she figures out what's going on and just kind of accepts it. And although she doesn't know why she's time travelling, and nobody knows why she's time travelling, she doesn't spend a great deal of time pondering what's causing this time travel. But I suppose at the same time she's also very much focused on why she's there and protecting herself and those she loves. So I can get that, but I did think that was slightly funny, but it kind of, you know, it kept the plot rolling at a good pace, and I just thought this book was incredible. It's a book that is very, very much worth the hype for me. I'm glad I finally read it, and because it is obviously exploring a dark, serious topic, it can be very dark and violent in moments, and it doesn't shy away from the realities of slavery in the US, and gives you that kind of modern-ish perspective on those events from our 1970s character, which I think makes it all the more accessible but equally horrifying to a modern reader, because you have that protagonist that you can relate to a little bit more because you come from a more similar time period, being flung into this environment. And it's just incredible, just works so well, and such a unique concept that I've really never read anywhere else before. So I would highly, highly recommend that, and I myself am definitely going to be reading more of Octavia E. Butler in the future, so do recommend to me your favourite if you have one. The next book I finished, however, was The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. This is a book I thought I was going to like. It's another one that's received a lot of hype. It is a debut novel that came out this year, but I did not expect to enjoy it as much as I did. This was a book I started and could not put down, finished in the space of a few days, and it's quite a chunky novel. But that's because the pacing and the mystery was so perfection. So if you haven't gathered, this is a mystery novel, but it's another one that has a bit of a paranormal, science fiction, fantasy spin on it, in that we are following our protagonist who seems to be in a sort of Agatha Christie-esque time period, you know, first half of the 1900s, staying in this big manor house where a party is going on, but every morning he wakes up in the body of a different guest at this house, and every morning he can remember what happened the day before. However, on the first morning he knows nothing, and for all he knows, he is the person that he wakes up in the body of, but as you quickly learn, he is somebody else inhabiting these people's bodies, and he is supposed to be putting together the different clues that he's garnering from each life he is leading over the same day, in order to solve the murder of Evelyn Hardcastle, as the title suggests. And this is a book that is so phenomenally well paced. It is such an intricately woven mystery that I felt like there was new layers added every single page almost. And our protagonist is one of those mystery protagonists where you know the same amount that he does. So as the story unravels, you have the same information as he does, so you're kind of piecing things together at the same rate as he does. Obviously you might make different connections from him, but you are trying to solve things as they go along, and you're never given too much information that the ending becomes obvious, but it is fun to guess along and sort of wonder at least what's going to happen in the next page, because trust me, there are so many layers to the mystery. You have the mystery of who murdered Evelyn Hardcastle, you have the mystery of why is he waking up in different people's bodies every morning, and those are just the two initial mysteries. Trust me, there are more, and it is just built upon layer upon layer upon layer, and I thought it was incredibly cleverly done. This is the kind of novel that I read and just cannot fathom how somebody wrote it and came up with the concept and was able to thread it so intricately throughout the story. It blows me away. Some of the different bodies that he occupies are a little bit irritating, and I did find the way they were depicted a little bit irritating, but overall this was like almost a 5-star read for me. It was like, you know, 4.5. It was so much fun to follow, and I could not put it down. I then read the third in a series, which is Blameless by Gail Carragher. This is the third in the Parasol Protectorate series, which follows Alexa Tarabotti, who is a aristocratic woman living in the 1800s in London, but this 1800s London is a little bit different from the 1800s London that we know, in that there are supernatural creatures that are part of society and everybody knows about them, and they live as a part of everyday society. So there are werewolves, there are vampires, and there are a few others, but they're not as central. So there are ghosts, and our protagonist Alexa is actually supernatural in her own way, which is very rare, in that when she touches a supernatural creature they stop being supernatural. So she can kind of like draw out that supernaturalness from them, and she's known as a soulless, but most of the people she knows doesn't know she's a soulless because it's not as common a supernatural breed as say werewolves and vampires are. However, these are such fun. These are like incredibly comical, historical, what is the word, sort of steampunk novels, and it's not a genre I'm not familiar with, to be honest. There is lots of references to kind of like fun science that's going on at the time. It's not historically accurate, but fits in well with this kind of fantasy alternate London that we're living in. So I think they're very accessible for the steampunk genre, not having read anything else in them, because I haven't, and I really enjoy them. However, book 2 I had not loved as much as book 1. Book 1 I thought was like rip-roaring, great fun adventure, loved it, loved the characters. Book 2, there was multiple things that irritated me. Overall I enjoyed it, but it was like more of a 3-star than a 4-star. And to be honest, a lot of the things that annoyed me might not annoy other people, because this one was set in Scotland and the Scottish accents were atrocious. The Scottish dialect was just really bad, and obviously I'm Scottish, so that thing bugs me more than it might bug other people. I also felt irritated by the actions of one of the main characters, but I still enjoyed it. It wasn't like I'm going to ditch this series by any means. It did take me a while to pick up book 3 though because of that. However, book 3 was back up there with book 1 for me. Book 3 may even be my favourite so far. It was so much fun. Obviously I can't tell you much about the story because it would be spoilers, but I mean the key themes here are paranormal, historical London, steampunk, hilarity. They're definitely meant to be comical. There's some like fun romance blended in there. There's lots of mysteries and just hijinks, and they're just fantastic. Love these books. So glad to have gone back to the 3rd book and rediscovered my love for them, and definitely plan on picking up book 4 sooner rather than later. But lastly, I read a book that I do have a physical copy of here to show you, and that is Oh My Gods by Alexandra Shepherd. I love the facial expression of the main character. So this is a young adult novel, and to be perfectly honest, this is like teenage Jean's dream novel. I would have adored this book when I was a teenager. I still very much enjoyed it, but you know when you do read something that's maybe not aimed at your age specifically, and you just think, wow, like lucky teenagers, I would have like killed to have this book when I was their age. But it is still great fun if you are an adult. This is a young adult novel with a lot of the basic premises of a young adult novel. We follow our protagonist Helen, whose mother passed away a few years ago. She's now gone to live with her dad after having lived with her grandmother for a while in London. She started at a new school, she's making new friends. She has to share the house with her half-sister on her dad's side, who is a massive pain, and all of that. And at the same time, she's wondering when she's going to get her first kiss. But wait for it. She's actually a halfling, half-mortal, half-daughter of a god. So her dad, who she's now gone to live with, is Zeus, and her half-sister is Aphrodite. There's also Apollo and Eros, and perhaps some other characters from Greek mythology in there that you might recognise. So this very much plays on the idea that back in the time of Greek mythology, people like Zeus were constantly siring half-children with mortals, but in this concept, obviously the Greek gods have continued to live. They've never died. They have lived up into the 21st century, and this is an example of Zeus's half-daughter in the 21st century living in London. And obviously Helen has to keep this side of her family a secret from her friends. Nobody can know that she is the daughter of a Greek god. And it is so much fun. I just thought that was such a fun, unique concept. I love the blending of sort of like London with ancient Greece. Our protagonist is mixed race. Her mother was Jamaican and her father is obviously Greek. And she's grown up in England her whole life. It's just such a fun read. I think that concept's so unique. And you just speed through it, you giggle, it's great. I just thought it was so much fun. And just like a real palate cleanser. Obviously, our protagonist has gone through some quite serious things in her life, like her mother having died a few years ago, and she writes letters to her mother that you read throughout the book, and that's sort of her way of like communicating with her mother and keeping her mother in her life. So it's like a sort of diary / letters to my mother, and that was all handled so sensitively, but it was generally overall just a really fun book, and it wasn't like super serious or dark in any way. It was like just a book that puts a smile on your face. I just think, what a great concept. I'm very impressed by the author coming up with this. But those are the 4 books I read in the second half of December. I am in the middle of a few more, so I'll be getting back to you about those in January 2019, I know. Do let me know if you have any thoughts on the books I've mentioned in this video, and if you have read anything good in December. But until next time, happy reading, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye guys!